Greetings from Lansing, Michigan. I am on the beautiful campus of Michigan State University. I'm here to do some viola and chamber music master classes, but I'm also just about to see my buddy, Eric Nowlin, who I haven't seen in quite a few years now, but he is principal viola of the Detroit Symphony, and he teaches here. He's got a really great viola, so let's go take a look. Eric.
Masumi.
Hey, when I walked into your studio yesterday and I saw this beast sitting on your piano, my jaw dropped a little bit because it's a beautiful viola. Can you tell me a little bit about this instrument?
Sure. So this is a very unusual instrument. It's made by GB or JB Guadagnini in 1757. In Milan.
In Milan, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, he was a very peripatetic maker, so it's very confusing as to which city he was making in at the time. But this one was made in Milan. And this instrument is quite unusual because it was originally made as a smaller viola. And typically around that time period, violas were made smaller because it was a bit of a reaction against the huge tenor violas of the previous era, and I think players wanted something that they could actually get around on and play pieces that were more technically challenging, particularly for the left hand.
So it was a contralto?
Yeah, it was like an alto viola when it was made. And so in the 1940s, the Hill Shop in London actually enlarged this viola, and they made it bigger. So that's very unusual. Typically, we always think of violas as being cut down. Oh, was this viola cut down? Especially anything, made before the 18th century.
I think the English understood we always need more viola.
You need more viola. You always need more viola. So they did some very innovative and interesting woodwork on this instrument. They added some sections here on the bottom and on the top, and then same thing on the front of the instrument.
So they just expanded the whole pattern?
They expanded it.
Wow.
That's right.
Do you know if they did it proportionally? So it basically looks like the same outline but just bigger? There's a lot of math involved, right?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I did manage to track down a photo, an old black and white photo of the original viola. So
that's incredible.
Prior to the 40s. Wow. And it does look different. It looks a little bit more squat. So one thing that's also kind of interesting about this viola is that it has a really big butt. It's cannot lie. It's
the lower bouts.
Yeah, the lower bouts here are quite robust.
Yeah.
And so the original viola, it was pretty close to that same width here.
Yeah.
And so it looked like it kind of went like this, but then wasn't kind of rounded out, and so it almost felt like it was kind of cut off a little bit. So
interesting.
In a strange sense, it looks more natural when they added this on here. It looks like a more kind of rounded
So
curve
essentially,
here.
they only added length on the top and the bottom, not on the sides, really.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was plenty wide as it was already.
But it's really remarkable because it's really rather hard to see.
Yeah, they did a pretty incredible job on this. The back is obviously quite difficult, and it's more noticeable when you have a back of maple that doesn't have kind of the fine grain that the spruce top has. There's probably a bit less complications involved in trying to do it, but the front is what I think is really kind of amazing, is that they managed with all of these grains of this spruce to line up two different pieces of wood, or possibly a lot more than two, that were hundreds of years apart. And they managed to line up all these grains so that
So it looks like one piece of wood.
So it looks like one piece of wood,
Wow.
which is really,
Yeah.
I mean, this must have taken them possibly years. I mean,
Right.
I can't imagine how long it must have taken them.
Yeah. It must have been in the 1940s a commission by an owner to, whoever owned the viola at the time, right? I mean, rather than the shop kind of having this idea like, oh, we need a bigger viola.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I believe at the time it was owned by an English violist, Keith Cummings, who was in a string quartet. And if I'm just going to conjecture here, my thinking would be that he probably wanted a viola that had a deeper voice and a lower range, that was closer to truly being in between a violin and a cello.
Sure.
Because I'm imagining that the original viola was maybe more of an alto or contralto viola, as you say. And that might have, in a string quartet, might have been too balanced towards the upper strings.
I see.
That would be my conjecture,
it's
but
interesting,
who knows why.
Right.
I do think probably it ended up making this a better sounding viola and more, actually, probably more violistic. So, in my humble but correct opinion.
So, how did you come to have this instrument?
Well, this is owned by Detroit Symphony, and they were looking to purchase an instrument for use by the principal player, which is me. And so I went out and searched around for an instrument.
Call out to the universe.
Put a call out to the universe.
Viola! Do you know how many violas you ended up trying?
It wasn't a huge number. There aren't that many of this caliber on the market at any given time. So I would say maybe 12.
12 violas, that's actually quite a lot. And over what time period?
This would have been maybe inside of 6 months. I mean, it was fairly quick.
Wow.
Yeah, this was not a multi-year project or something.
Wow.
So I ended up trying a variety of instruments. There's a guy named Jonathan Tobin that works for Becker Shop in Chicago, and he brought a number of instruments out on Orchestra Hall stage in Detroit. And I got to try them one after another, which was probably one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah.
Trying all those great instruments.
Wow.
And this is the one that kind of spoke to me.
Yeah, so do you know what it was about this instrument above all the others that spoke to you?
Well, I mean, trying instruments is really hard because sometimes you don't always know what you want.
Right.
You know, I mean, you have a few specific things like, okay, I don't want it to be too big, I don't want it to be too small, I want it to have clarity and projection, but a warm sound. But once we get beyond those basics, and especially instruments like this, there's that intangible factor that you don't really know you're looking for it until you play it and you think, oh, I like that.
There it is.
There it is, yeah there it is. Yeah. And so this instrument had that for me, and I would say it kind of it checked all the boxes that I was looking for. I think maybe that's a good way to put it. Is that it managed to fulfill pretty much all of the things that I was looking for. It does have a few quirks. One thing that's a good quirk is that for an old instrument, it's actually remarkably stable.
Oh, that's great.
Whether it's dry or humid, hot or cold, it actually behaves like a modern instrument. It doesn't go out of whack. A lot of old instruments are like old people, and they get very cranky when the weather changes.
Yeah, a little
feeling it in the knees. And this one is remarkably stable, so that's kind of quirky, but in a really good way.
So in the course of these 4 years, has the viola changed? Or have you changed?
Yes. At first, I tried to play this instrument the way that I played my previous instrument, which was Giovanni Pastucci is the instrument that I own. It was a smaller viola, and different approach.
How big was that, the Pistucci?
16.
16, and how big is this?
16 and a half.
And a half, okay.
And I guess if I have advice for people is like, don't try to play a new instrument the same way you played your previous one. Because what happened to me is I was playing on this and I was basically trying too hard in a sense, and I wasn't letting the instrument do a lot of the work for me. And actually right before the pandemic, I started having some arm issues. And then sort of serendipitously, the pandemic hit, and then I could actually take some time off, and I sort of relearned how to approach this instrument kind of on its own terms, and I haven't had any issues since.
Wow,
so I have definitely grown as a result of using this instrument, because I kind of realized, I learned to be humble. And I realized how to approach it on its own terms and how to play this instrument according to the way that it needs to be played.
So you still have the Pistucci, right?
I do.
So when you go back and play a few notes on the Pistucci, do you play differently now?
Yeah.
And do you feel like you actually maybe play the Pistucci better now because of this? I mean,
I play it differently. I wouldn't say better.
Yeah.
I guess what I did realize is when I go back and play that instrument, I need to then go back and play that instrument the way it needs to be played. So I don't try to play it the same way that I played this one.
But it's an interesting idea, because like when you approached the Pistucci for the first time, you were coming from wherever you came from at that point. So it's like one angle of entry, and now having had this experience, you're coming at it a slightly different way. So it's like you're in a way a different player.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment.
So it's like a different relationship on some level.
That's right.
Yeah, interesting.
That's right. So,
do you mind playing a few notes on this instrument so we can hear the sound?
Would love to. Let me see. Today we're going to have a show for you called Between Two Violas. Enjoy.